Hello out there, weirdos, and welcome to episode 18 of the Weird Wide Web podcast. This is going to be the last episode of season 1, and we've come full circle. I'm actually on today with Kasey Hill. She's my sometimes co-host. She is a sometimes author. She's a sometimes publisher, editor, a little bit of everything. Oh, and book cover artist. And we're here today to talk about The Devil's Playground. But you know what's funny is, I think it might have been our very first episode. We were discussing this book, and it was kind of an idea you had, and it was just opening to submissions. And I was toying around with the idea of sending a story, and I did. And now it's in the book. The book is out. There's 61 authors, and we have Kasey Hill to thank. So, hello, Kasey. How are you today?
I am doing good. My husband, not so much. He needs his tooth pulled, so he is home asleep because he didn't sleep at all last night. So I'm hiding through the house so I don't wake him up.
Oh my God. Tell Alvin that I hope he feels better, and I hope he gets his tooth pulled soon. That really sucks.
Yeah.
So, The Devil's Playground. This is so exciting. Did I get it right? Is there 61 authors in this?
Yes, it is. So many people came together for this, and I actually have to give a little nod and shout out to Josh Darling, since he invited a lot of people into the group since the book hadn't picked up momentum yet. And after he invited a bunch of people, so many people came in and were like, I'm donating. They've either been personally touched by issues of drug addiction by people they know, or they're recovering addicts themselves, whether it be drugs, alcohol, or any other type of addiction. And I was just so full of happiness that there's so many people out there that wanted to contribute to this and help me with this book.
That's awesome. And for those who don't run in our horror indie circle, Josh Tarling is actually editor-in-chief of Carnage House e-zine, in which I've had a story, and Kasey has had a story. If you want to check it out, Carnage House. Anyway, back to The Devil's Playground, because we could get sidetracked with plugging our side projects all day. I'm just so excited, and I really loved all of your contributions to it. Aside from being the publisher and editor, you put in a poem that's from the heart and a very harrowing piece kind of to introduce the collection, really. Were those hard for you to write?
So honestly, when I first began the project, I had a different piece for this book. I had written a piece for an anthology that I was no longer going to be included in. So I set off to Facebook and I was like, hey guys, does anyone know of any charity projects in horror that are accepting charity pieces for drug addiction? And people were like, no, but if you do one, I will sub to it. And then I got all of these people that were gung-ho about subbing to it. And I later acquired J.C. Masek as a...
Oh, he told me a good trick to remember his name is that it's like Sissy Spacek. So J.C. Masek the third. I mean, come on. We got to honor J.C. Masek the third. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, he came to me with the Symptom of the Universe project with Black Sabbath. And my piece was originally for a Black Sabbath anthology, and it was the Sabbath Stones. And I sat on this piece for a long time, even after I had accepted the project as for publication through Dark Moon Rising. And I finally was just like, you know what? I'm going to put this where it belongs, and I'll just write something new. And the story did not go the way I had actually planned. When I initially planned the story, it was going to be another revenge piece like the Sabbath Stones. It was going to be the person who was supposed to be a sober buddy was the reason why the person was back on drugs and everything like that. And I started writing it, and it took a whole different turn. Like, I channeled Mike Flanagan. I absolutely adore Mike Flanagan. House on Haunted Hill, The Haunting of Hill House. I do that all the time. Haunting of Hill House, Bly Manor, all of his mini TV series.
And then
I
he
adore
did
them.
what was the Edgar Allan Poe one recently? House of Usher, was that it?
Follow the House of Usher.
Yeah, I think he did something
Yeah.
with that too. Anyway, I'll
Yes.
sidetrack you again. You got to watch me.
Yes, he did follow the House of Usher, which all of his pieces deal with death. There's always this dark, gothic element of death in his pieces. And when I sat down to write the carousel, I completely channeled Poppy from The Haunting of Hill House. And she's this eccentric character in there that she just latches on, and it's just the way she does her character. The actor who portrayed her did an awesome job for it. And that's basically how I wrote the story, and it just came out as word vomit. And I took to the group. I'm like, I wrote this, but I want you all to approve this for this book, because I do not just publish my stuff willy-nilly. I always have other people say yay or nay for my stuff. And everyone's like, this needs to be the opening piece.
And it probably does because, well, I don't want to get into the hard stuff right away, but it's no secret to you and I that we share a painful bond, that you and I both in 2023 lost a nephew to addiction. And when I read your stuff, I feel that emotion coming through. And obviously, I'm connecting with it on a really personal level. And so I think it was the right thing for you to contribute the pieces. There are also just so many other authors. Like, I had considered reading off the list, but how many names do you want to hear me slaughter in one episode? Really?
Well, I've already slaughtered one of them.
Right off the rip, we already did. So, but yeah, it's such a huge volume, and I keep forgetting. Terrible me. I should have made notes. What is the charity that this goes to?
To Write Love on Her Arms. It is a nonprofit organization that was started up because the person who heads it, their friend needed help, and there was nowhere to turn for help. So they started their nonprofit, and it's not just for people who need rehab and everything for that. They're also a mental health organization. They help you get in for psychiatrists. They help you as a hotline. They help so many different people. And I had heard of them through a friend several years ago, and it has been my go-to nonprofit for, like, whenever Facebook does the birthday fundraiser. I always choose them because it's a multifaceted nonprofit charity organization.
That's awesome. And that's why I really wanted to put this episode out and encourage everybody to go pick up a copy, because even if you're not looking to buy the big, bulky print volume, which you really should, because you could probably read that thing for a year, it's also on Kindle, and it's a great price on there. And, all the proceeds are going toward this charity, which is why a lot of us kind of felt the call to chip in our stories. Mine personally, I dusted off from, it was originally published in 2008. But I kind of felt in some weird way it fits the theme because the main character does have a dark addiction. It's a little out there, but it's called Devil in Disguise, and It's weird, but I'm sure once I make it through these 61 authors who've contributed, it won't be the weirdest one in there, I bet.
So many people are like, I don't know how my piece ended up in this. And it's like I told one person, each story was curated specifically for this anthology. So if you made it into the anthology, it was because your story belonged there.
Right, and I felt like when I sat back and looked at everything I've written over the years, that's the one I kind of felt, well, here we go. So I think I think that is another amazing thing about these anthologies because it's everybody putting in their own input because not only do you have the author sending in the story that they think speaks best to the theme and just the anthology as a whole, you've got a whole team of people working on it on the other end. So that being said, I mean, how much darn work was this for you guys to get together?
Honestly, like it was a beast. Like it took me around 3 weeks to edit it myself, and then for the second pass, I passed it off to two separate editors in halves, just so like it wouldn't take longer because it would have took them a week or more to edit it behind me. So I split it up between Jackie Day and Rob Tannehill, and it took them about a week to get just half of them back to me. So like it was a monster. The formatting on it, I'm pretty quick at formatting. Like within a day I can have something formatted, but like the editing of it was where the trick came into play.
Oh, yeah, because it is crazy with editing. I'll read main label books that I picked up off the bookshelf at Barnes and Noble by best-selling authors, and I'll catch editorial errors just because they're gonna slip through. And then it's crazy because I can read one of my own stories 500 times and still overlook something because the way that the brain is set up to read, you're just, you're processing that information quicker than you should, I think. But so we always appreciate you editors, and having a handful of them on a book is always helpful.
Yes, I was very appreciative because both of them reached out and they're like, "I will help with edits if you need me to," and I needed them to, so I really appreciated them offering the help.
And what's the mixture like? Is there a good amount of poetry, or is it mostly stories?
It's almost half and half. The way I set the formatting up for the book is you have at least two stories and then three poems as interludes. So you read two stories and then you get poetry. You read two stories, then you get poetry. And it's towards the end where it just becomes mainly short stories. The poetry submissions had tapered off and everything, so it becomes a chunk of short stories at the end, which they're actually shorter short stories instead of the longer pieces. So I guess it evens out in the end.
Yeah, it has its flow and its balance. And that's part of the art form of putting together a collection or an anthology. I dealt with that with Secrets of the Slain I had put out because I had both short stories and poems I wanted to include in it. So then I found myself going, well, you almost need to pick the poem that leads well into the following story. And it's a bigger can of worms than people think. A lot of thought goes into it.
Yes, yes. And it was a cadence for me. Like it was like dancing through the formatting for it. Cause at first I just had all the short stories in there, and then I was going to put the poetry towards the back, and then I was like, I maybe every three short stories, every four short stories, and I'm like, you know what, there's enough poetry here to where I can balance out every two short stories and put poetry in between them.
And, I wasn't sure what I was going to do on episode 18 to close out season 1 of the Weird Wide Web podcast. And it just occurred to me we were starting to get some sales on this, and they're going to go to such a great cause, that charity. And I'm like, let's just keep going. Let's get some more. And so if you're out there listening, you really should go pick up The Devil's Playground. You can pick it up on Amazon, like I said, Kindle and print, whichever one you prefer, because we would love to be able to say we just donated so much money to this good cause. It would warm our hearts. Um, Aside from good causes and charities, when I originally didn't know what I was really going to do for episode 18, I posted a status online and I just said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. So if anybody has any weird questions they want me to ask Kasey Hill, go for it. And who do you think answered? That darn rascal, J.C. Masick III. You mention his name, he just pops up, that rascal. I'm not going to ask
I
some of
know.
these. I don't know. I'm looking at him. This is weird. Well, the first one is, are you finally ready to admit that you're an international super spy with the highest kill count of any of your peers?
It's classified.
I like this one. Who's your favorite My Little Pony? Wait, I don't know any of their names. For real, like,
I like Pinky.
she does. She knew the name.
Mary Jane was obsessed with My Little Pony.
Sure. Are you sure that you're not like in that brony community?
Oh, I'm not in the brony. I'm not. No. No.
Let's see. I'm going to say right now on the air that we're not sure what this audio will end up being because it does keep telling me and Kasey that it's dropping parts of the audio. So I'm just going to try to piece this thing together like Frankenstein. Okay. But I do accept donations if anybody ever wants to help me get a new laptop. Because we're not sure what the problem is, but there is a suspicious amount of errors going on. And I have an ancient little Chromebook. So you do the math out there, listeners. You do it. All right, here is our last weird question from J.C. Masick III, Kasey. Should cumin be added to spaghetti sauce? Why or why not?
I guess it would be a good substitution for the red chili flakes. I tried red chili flakes one time and AJ said he was dying.
He doesn't like spicy?
No. Like he took a bite of it and he was like, I can't breathe.
I'm sorry, but
I didn't even add that much to it either. Like it's just like I've never added it back after that either. So like there's no red chili flakes at all whenever I make homemade spaghetti sauce.
And you know those memes of Kermit the Frog where there's an evil version of himself in the cloak? I just
Yes.
picture that for you, and it's just telling you, add the spice.
If he does, he does. Oh, God.
We have fun. I hope these stupid technology problems stop, though. They're pissing me off. You know that? I'm saying that on the air, and if it makes it through, I'm keeping it. This is pissing me off because we're trying to plug the Devil's Playground.
What's funny about this is last night my phone was possessed. I had been sharing all kinds of creepy videos to confessions from the think tank group. Like I post all kinds of things in there to give inspiration to the authors. And like all of a sudden my screen just started like jiggling and going up and down. It even drew down my menu and turned airplane mode on.
Why? Why does technology hate me, and why does it hate you? What did we do?
We are haunted.
We are a haunted people, but we can put together some good stories and some good books. What else do you have going on besides the Devil's Playground? Because we'll get back to that, but I mean, what else you got?
I have Last Christmas horror holiday anthology coming out later this month. and I have The Beauty and Darkness that's slated for release in January. That is a tribute to T.S. Woolard. Back in 2021, we had decided that we would go in partners with one another for the publishing company, and this was our first anthology that we were going to launch as partners. But he ended up leaving the writing community, and then later, subsequently, he passed away from COVID. So it's been a project I've been trying to get off the ground, and it finally took off this year, and I decided to make it a tribute to him.
I remember that, and whenever I realized how personally it had touched you, yeah, I'm so sorry for that. And I'm so happy that you accepted some of my cemetery photography for that one, because I think it kind of plays well with all the prose that's going to be in there. So
I love your cemetery photos. I love dark gothic stuff, and I remember earlier this year that you had posted where you had submitted one of your photos for a contest or a
no, I
magazine or something
actually
like that.
I sent a bunch of them to an online magazine that was supposed to be opening up, and I don't know if they just kind of met a wall with their fundage with trying to get off the ground, but I never heard back, and as far as I know, the website still hasn't have anything on it. So, and that was months ago, and I wanted those cemetery photos out there. So now they'll be in Beauty of Darkness along with a bunch of, is it kind of like a gothic romance theme, or how would you describe that one?
The Beauty and Darkness, I guess a gothic romance is kind of a way that you could put it. There are tons of poems, and there's short stories, and there's artwork, and the main theme is the actual title of the anthology, Beauty and Darkness. And when we had come up with the idea together, he was known as a poet for his dark writing, and he had this fascination with his poetry of loving death. So we kind of took that idea that he always wrote about and ran with it for the anthology. So there's, of course, there's pieces about death in there, but then there's the interesting things, like, for instance, Thomas Folske subbed a story called The Light Passenger, and it's about a serial killer, but this serial killer only kills pedophiles.
Nice. We can all get behind that.
So, like, even though he's a serial killer and that's dark and horrid and everything like that, he's killing pedophiles, which is the beauty of that serial killer.
Ah, the beauty in the darkness. Okay, I got
Yes.
it now. Well, that one sounds awesome too. Last Christmas. Oh my gosh, I guess you've recruited me for all your projects. I have a Krampus one in that one. And Rob, who's editing Last Christmas, he's got me really interested in some of the stories. He builds them up on his social, and I'm looking forward to that one too. So I thank you and your press for all your hard work.
And he's the one who wrote the description for the blurb for the book and everything like that. So that's all him, because he's the one who read the submission, so he knows what stories are in the book. And I'm like, dude, you know the book, you write it. And he cranked out this description, and I'm like, I'm sold. I want a copy of this.
Nice. I don't recall it, so now I'm going to have to go pull it up again after this. And,
It is in the Last Christmas group.
okay. And that's the beauty of this community, like working with all these people and branching out and seeing their creative input on everything. It's so rewarding.
It really is. Like, people are always asking me, like, I'm in some reading groups, and they're like, what are you reading today? And I'm like, I'm reading submissions. And that is the highlight of my life, because I love reading. So when I have submissions, I am never bored. I have stories, I have poetry to read, and it, like, many of the submissions, like nearly 98% of the submissions, are really, really great written pieces. And when I accept the submissions, I'll get an email back. They're like, oh my God, I have been trying to get this published everywhere, and it's been passed on and it's been passed on. So thank you for accepting it. And it makes me smile because I'm like, you know what? I love that story. So I'm so glad that I was the one who got to publish it.
Because it is hard out there. You know, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to mention any names because I'm not even upset about it. But just as an example, I got an email update yesterday updating all the authors who had submitted somewhere that they're still working on it. And some of them had submitted as long as 7 months ago. So likely, if it's taking them that long to get through submissions, they likely got hundreds. And very well, these people that have been waiting for 7 months are just aware that they're sitting there waiting on a no now. And that is part of it. It's part of the writing community. You've got to have thick skin. You've got to have resilience. But to have a press like yours that's always just with the open sub calls, and you will fill up a book. I mean, look, with 61 authors, it's offering more of a platform and more opportunities for the new authors in the community to experience less crushing rejection. We'll put it that way, because it gets exhausting. It really does. So I'm sure that you've been the inspiration for a lot of people to keep going with it, rather than to crawl into a hole and cry. We thank you for that too.
It is my pleasure. It honestly is. And I know that there's so many people who rail on presses that do royalty free, no royalty payouts for anthologies. But honestly, like, I mean, in the future, I'm going to have certain anthologies that are paying anthologies, but I used to do like the split royalty payment. Like, I would take a percentage and then the rest of it would be split up between the authors. And like when we get sales on it, it's just pennies on the dollar. Literally pennies on the dollar. I think maybe 50 cents in the end for each author, because I have a lot of authors. So doing the royalty free way instead of having to pay out, there's more room for authors.
And basically, instead of divvying up a bunch of tiny payments, a lot of the time with these charity anthologies, you're just able to donate the whole chunk. As we just saw with the Black Sabbath anthology, Symptoms of the Universe, you just made a donation to the what is it, the Ronnie Dio Cancer Fund?
Yes.
See, I'm pretty good. I didn't make any notes. So the Ronnie James Dio's Cancer Fund, they just got a bunch of money from that book. And so, I mean, there are benefits to this, and I'm seeing the good that you're doing. I'm happy that I got to know you better, although it's, it was somewhat monstrous circumstances that brought us so close. But hey, man, that goes hand in hand with writing horror.
Yes.
And that's all we're going to say. Just like Forrest Gump says, that's all I'm going to say about that.
That's all I got to say about that.
Because our audio keeps giving me errors and dropping on and off, I literally have no idea how long we've been on because it keeps restarting the timer. I do have a really cool segment I'm going to piece in where some of the authors from the Devil's Playground have sent me audio clips of them talking about their contribution to the anthology and what it means to them. And so I'm going to piece that in after our little chat here. So that should be fun.
Oh, that is going to be fun.
But I'm such an unreliable dope. A couple people were asking how long they had to send me the voice clips, and I was like, oh, you've got till the end of the weekend. And now I kind of want to get this episode out today. So I'm going to go around rushing everybody and see what I can come up with, because that's how I do it. When I get a fire under my butt, you better go, go, go.
It's like, hey, you know how I said you had until like Sunday? Well, I lied.
Just press the record button and send them in. Oh, I don't know why I'm screaming that to the listeners of this podcast who are going to be listening to this after the fact and literally can't control the outcome. But that's because I've lost my mind by episode 18. I have. It has been such a long, crazy ride. I did not know I was going to start this podcast at the beginning of 2024. It had been on the back burner because I purchased weirdwideweb.org in like 2020. I always say 2019, but it may have been 2020. But then the pandemic and everything happened, and I never did much with it. And then all of a sudden, I got the urge this year. I'm like, I'm going to do something with it. So I started the podcast, and here we are on episode 18. Wow.
I mean, it's pretty similar for me too. I started Dark Moon Rising in 2019, and then in 2020, started having health problems. And from 2021, where it was the last two books that I had put out personally for myself and for T.S. Woolard, from there until January, when I started talking about doing anthologies again for the company, and then put out my own books again that I had been working on slowly throughout the years. Like, it had just come to one great halt, and I was like, this is my year. This is going to be my year. This is the year where it's no more procrastination. It's no more, I can't do it. It is, I am doing this. The big I ams.
Rebirth, I guess.
Yes.
I feel that. And I think 2025 is going to be even stronger.
I have a feeling it is too.
Well, is there anything else you want to talk about? Because I think with all these audio clips that these crazy ass authors in the Devil's Playground are sending me, I think I'll be able to fill out the episode pretty good from here on out.
I just wanted to plug, you've already plugged Symptom of the Universe. I also wanted to plug the other charity anthology that I released in September. The editors were Pixie, Bruner, and Alison Armstrong on that one, and it's the Nature Triumphs charity anthology of dark speculative literature, and all of the proceeds for that one are being donated to the Nature Conservancy. You can find copies of Nature Triumphs and Symptom of the Universe on Amazon, wide links like Barnes & Noble, Smashwords, and as well as on Godless.
And I've legit been meaning to read Nature Triumphs because I love dark speculative.
Oh, that one, I absolutely adore Nature Triumphs. Like the eco horror aspect of it all, eco horror, it's all eco related, eco dark spec, eco horror, and my short story of man-eating cannabis plants made its debut in that one. It was accepted by both Pixie and Alyson, and I was very thrilled with that.
That's how I want to go. That's how I want to die. And man, I should have sent something to that too, because I guess I do write eco horror, because I've got a story where a pumpkin patch eats a guy. I've got a story where a haunted tree stump that gets disrespected comes and eats a guy. I should have got in on that. Darn.
Nature just be eating people. Breaking Bread found its home with Last Christmas, where my sourdough starter is eating people.
Oh, Lord. I mean, what more do you need in a horror story? You know what I thought about? Just the other day, I had this memory of when I was a child and I would be camping and I would hear the bird in the trees and it would go, whippoorwill, whippoorwill. And I asked my parents.
Whippoorwill birds. Oh, I love those birds.
So I asked my parents and they said it's a whippoorwill. And all these years later, I started thinking, were they just messing with me? Because they did that all the time. And I've never heard anyone else talk about that bird. So I Googled it. And have you ever looked at one really?
Yes, I have.
Have you ever really zoomed in and looked at a whippoorwill?
Mm.
I'm telling you, if you let's say if it was 100 times the size it was, horrifying. It would be horrifying. And I'm thinking about doing something with it. Next thing you're going to see it. It's going to be Amazon.com. Come get whippoorwill. Lindsey Goddard.
You know what the funny thing about that is? Okay, we need to do this together because I was literally riding down the road the other day thinking of whippoorwills after listening to Randy Travis's song because he mentions them in the song. And I'm like, you know what? I've always loved whippoorwills. And they're like a very prominent bird in West Virginia. So I was like, you know what? I could do something Appalachian with those birds.
You know, you've got something there. We've got to do something with the whippoorwill.
Yes.
You know what? We ought to cut this whole part out of this episode so no one steals our whippoorwill idea. See, I'm so glad you were able to come on today because it has been a long season. I've been having some anxiety this month, and, I've talked to a lot of strangers. I've put myself out there. Well, not necessarily strangers, but when you hop on this headset and you're one-on-one on the audio with people you've never met, personally, that's pushing my own boundaries. And I've put myself out there and I've done it. But I'm glad to wrap up the season with you because I feel like we're old chums at this point.
Oh, I feel the same way. And I hard agree. Like that's one reason why I've never did a podcast myself is because I would have to be the one to come up with everything and everything to say. And then I'm usually the one that, people bounce the ideas off of during. It's like they ask me the questions.
Oh, you're the rubber and I'm the glue. Nice. Okay. Both are necessary.
Yes, they are. You can't have two rubbers or two glues. It just be chaos.
Yeah. All right. I think I'm going to wrap this episode up. If you want to say, I always force everyone to say bye. So say bye to the listeners, Kasey.
Bye-bye.
She has such attitude. I'm going to have to see you after class for that attitude, Miss Hill. All right, everybody. I thank you so much for tuning in this whole season. And if you didn't tune in the whole season, go back and start at episode 1 and listen to the whole season. And I want to thank Kasey Hill for joining me today. I hope everyone will pick up a copy of The Devil's Playground. As she said, there's also other charity anthologies, Symptoms of the Universe and Nature's Triumphs, and they all go to great causes. And as far as you weirdos, I will see you all in season 2 of the Weird Wide Web podcast.
The Devil's Playground. The Devil's Playground is a horror charity anthology to benefit drug addiction released by Dark Moon Rising Publications. You can grab a copy on Amazon today. Now, let's hear from some of the authors in The Devil's Playground.
This is J.C. Masick III. I am the author of The Black Dahlia and, of course, The Exciter, which was featured on another episode of this very podcast, The Weird Wide Web. My contribution to The Devil's Playground is a short story, completely original, first printing of this one in The Devil's Playground, and the story is called The Medusan. This is an allegory for drug addiction that compares drug addiction to something of a toxic relationship with a very dangerous partner. In this case, the partner may well be, and certainly seems to be, the mythical character of Medusa from Greek Roman myths. in this story. I'm very careful not to demonize Medusa. I think that's been done to death, and I think that we can all know that if you pay attention to Medusa's story, she is in fact a very sympathetic character. She's the victim in that story. So when we go to the Medusan, my story, she is no less so. And if you take a look at drug addiction, there is always the case with the addict where they're looking at their drugs as this something that they truly love, that this is not going to hurt me. This is okay for me. Everything's going to be okay for me. You guys just simply don't understand what I'm going through here, and you don't understand that this is a beautiful thing that can help me. But of course, Medusa, whether she wants to or not, can eventually turn you to stone. And that is the core of the Medusan. Along the way, I take inspiration from the original Greek myths, as well as some latter-day tales, such as Rappaccini's Daughter, which you may or may not be familiar with. But if you read the story, you will catch that one. If you are familiar with Rappaccini's Daughter, you will also see a few of the more subtle hints toward Medusa and her history. But at the same time, the addict himself, the one who has fallen deeply in love with Medusa, is wasting away, and we pretty much have an idea what his ending might be. So please check out the Medusan and everything else in the Devil's Playground. I'm very honored to be in this one. I want to say thank you to Kasey Hill, and I hope that you all enjoy all the stories therein. I certainly enjoyed contributing. Thank you, Weird Wide Web. Talk to you next time.
I'm Basil Lebre. I'm a French writer, and I wrote the strange things about the squirrels, which can be found in the Devil's Playground Anthology. It's a short story about two friends, one of them discovering a dark video on YouTube and going on an adventure. It was actually the second short story I ever sold, and I'm glad to see it reprinted because with more experience I was able to ask Kasey to dedicate it to my best friend. This short story was based off our teenagehood together and our addiction that we carried through high school. So I got clean many years ago. My best friend came clean through the year, and I think it's both important for me to be part of this endeavor, and I'm glad that he'll be finally able to say this short story was always about me, and now there's a dedication proving it.
Okay, you may hear birds. The Crystal Ballad of the Beatnik Balaam is like the dark side of me on the street. Well, of course, I was shooting meth and heroin mixed, and studying the occult and the Bible, right? And that poetry there is kind of like a manifest of that on the page. Real majestic. You live on the street and you're a dope fiend. So that's what that was. And Loser's Ordeal was just me puking on the page. It's kind of my midlife crisis poem as I push 50 and I spent most of my time doing street things. So yeah, that's what that is. It's me dealing with all of that and some of the abuse that I suffered too, and how I turned to drugs as if they were a woman, like a wife. I really did view drugs like that. Very, very strange when I think about it now. And then what else did I do? The shark bite, right? I have a scar on my wrist where I had a baseball-sized abscess because I missed a shot that had meth in it. You really don't want to do that. And I have a really big scar on my wrist to prove that, and I call it my shark bite. I used to call it that when I would wash windows out there, run up with a squeegee, have my bucket on the corner, and wash somebody's window, and You can actually make pretty decent money in Houston like that. People would ask me what the hell happened to my wrist, and I would tell them I got bit by a shark swimming off of Galveston, because I figured that was better than saying I missed a shot. Something tells me nobody would have given me $1 if I'd have told them that. And that poem covers my being in the hospital and some of the thoughts I had while I was in there. Then finally, the Yen Dragon that acts as a sort of a epilogue to Prince Junkie, and it covers my Suboxone treatment and a little hallucination that I had in there and some things I learned about drug addiction in there, as best as I can remember all of that stuff, which is, perhaps dubious. What is it? Stephen King said writers are liars. Well, we are, but I tried not to, I think. Okay, that's pretty much mine.
Hey folks, Josh from Carnage House here. So I have a story in the Devil's Playground. The story is called The Worm's Turn, and it's inspired by true events that happened in my life, where I dated someone who was an intravenous drug user, and the relationship exploded after 3 months, but immediately after, she started doing pornography and moving on to worse drugs, and the story is kind of based on the concept of someone needing the bigger high and the bigger rush, and how hedonism just kind of collapses on itself.
My name is John Claude Smith, and my contribution to the anthology is a tale called The Anatomy of Addiction. It was originally titled The Last Supper, and in parentheses, The Anatomy of Addiction, and was published under my pseudonym, Akil Alexander, in the Horror Find website in 2004. The story deals with a world overtaken by zombies as viewed through the eyes of a junkie. I have a scene of shooting up in the story that I required detailed information about, so I called my best friend, the late great Fred Shaw, who was an on-again, off-again junkie, and said, "Hey, bud, I need details about shooting up." And he said, "Details? I'll show you." 45 minutes later, he showed up at my house, and we sat in a dimly lit kitchen, and he pulled out the rig, and he went through the whole process, telling me everything as he did it. This was that. When you do this, it's called jacking off, the whole thing. And I, as the writer, took in all the details as well as watched him, and the way the sweat glazed his face, and his anticipation was on fire. It was something both repugnant and amazing. Anyway, I took that, and I think it gave the story the proper boost it needed to really leave an impact.
This is Pixie Bruner. My piece, Observed Disremembrance, is published in The Devil's Playground, period. Don't ask me why I'm saying punctuation. It's weird doing voice memos. I don't normally do these. My piece is actually a creative nonfiction. I lived this. I was a DJ producer for many years. Events in that are slightly fictionalized. Me standing on a porch with a cop hugging me, telling an overdose victim, live or die, but don't ruin everything, is actually true. It was very hard for me to write about, and originally was a poem. I was asked to turn it into prose and expand it, and after some scandals and problems and issues and bad actors, this story is finally being told. Addiction is destructive, and there is a life after it. And while some people can walk away after trying drugs, not everybody can. And once you do walk away, you need support. And that is why I submitted and shared my story, because to write Love on Our Arms is an incredibly important charity to me and to other survivors. Thank you very much. This is Pixie Bruner, over and out.
Hey everyone, my name is Amanda Worthington, and I have 3 pieces in the Devil's Playground: Newly Made Vampire, Elegy of the Wicked, and How Do I? And I really decided that I wanted to submit work for this project because the mission is one I really truly believe in. It's one I can connect with personally. I grew up with a father with a gambling addiction. I've watched my veteran brother kind of deal with alcoholism, have dealt with a little bit of problematic drinking myself. I actually lost a dear friend of mine to alcoholism a couple of years back, and before that, a few years before that, my cousin passed away from heroin addiction. So I've kind of just been surrounded by addiction my whole life. So it's something I know a bit about. And these pieces are really personal. They're very vulnerable. I don't think a lot of the rest of the world really senses the extent to which, I would isolate in my sadness and kind of just make myself more depressed with a substance that is very much a depressant. So the last 2 years has been very trying for me. I got out of a relationship, a 6-year relationship with a narcissist, and have been slowly trying to rebuild myself since that time. And I started drinking again after 2.5 years of sobriety when the breakup happened, because I got sober for him. And this time around, I've done it for myself. So I'm very proud of that accomplishment. And I think these poems are really a slice in time, of a sense. Like, Newly Made Vampire is really about having wine again for the first time while I was waiting on a couple of friends to arrive at this bar. And I had kind of gone on and on in my head about, I can just have 1 or 2, it'll be fine. But I kind of thought to myself, this is not too dissimilar from everything I know about becoming a vampire. It must be kind of a little bit shaky, a little bit uncertain in the beginning when, after you've had that blood for the first time. So that was kind of the image that was in my head with that one. Elegy of the Wicked is really this kind of deep rumination on why I drank, and kind of almost equating it to this holy thing, this thing that is going to make me whole, this thing that is going to make me capable of, being social and not being this super awkward version of myself that I just naturally am. And it kind of ends with this kind of mantra of me saying it gives more than it takes, and kind of questioning all of that. And how do I is really just thinking about how do I do any of the things that I've learned to associate with drinking? How do I do them without drinking? And there's again a reference to a demon. So this is probably my issues here are probably the closest I've ever come to feeling possessed. And this is just kind of thoughts on that. So thanks.
Hello, my name is Mimi Vizana, and I wrote and contributed the story Get Me to the Devil's Playground Charity Anthology. A little background on the story. I grew up in the cocaine 80s. My parents were business people by day and drug dealers by night. It was a very glamorous life. They hung out with celebrities and threw great parties. But by the time I had reached the age of 10, I had seen more cocaine than most people would see in their lifetime. I didn't really see a downside to it, though, until the mid to late 80s, when some of the glamorous people had become hardcore addicts. Because of this, I made a vow to stay away from drugs and never date someone who was a user of anything more than weed. This naive approach actually did work for me. I never ended up dating an addict or, anything like that. However, the universe had other things planned. Someone I loved, who I never suspected would become an addict, became addicted to opioids after being prescribed them for post-surgical pain. And I watched this person in real time become less and less of who I thought them to be. Not who they are, because the truth is that this is a part of her. Addiction is still a part of her. But it was a breaking down of who I thought they were. So I would wake up at 2 or 3 a.m. and just sit and worry about where they were and are they safe? Was someone doing things to them they would never allow if they were sober? And one of these mornings, I decided to write. I had fallen in love with this song, Bloody Valentine by MGK, and you can judge someone else because the song was a perfect punk pop blend of the sound I missed from the 80s. And for some reason, it reminded me of my person. So I put it on repeat, and what ended up on the page was Gummy. The song and the story reminded me of the person I wrote it for. You know, it's vibrant and beautiful, but imperfect and fragile. And underneath, it's kind of sad because it's fleeting, and you know it's fleeting. You know that there's, it's not infinite. There has to be an end to it because it's just too beautiful. So I held on to Gummy for years after I wrote it because unlike the other stories I wrote, this one felt like it was personal and it needed the right home. This anthology, when I heard about it, it immediately felt like the right home. Addiction can and does affect anyone, and there just aren't enough resources for those struggling with addiction and mental health issues. So I hope people will buy this book because the charity To Write Love on Our Arms is doing good things and they need our support. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this.
Hey guys, this is your host, Lindsey B. Goddard. I also have a story in The Devil's Playground titled A Devil in Disguise, in which an elderly cannibal comes across a power the likes of which he's never seen before. Aside from the silly stories I write, this anthology hits close to my heart. I lost my sister when I was 18 and she was 22. She left us a beautiful son, whom I regarded as sort of a son of my own by inheritance. And we actually lost him as well at the age of 22. Addiction is a many-layered thing, and I have watched my entire life people turn their nose up at it and look down on it because it makes them feel maybe a little better off or a little better about themselves. But to those of us who understand it and for whom it hits close to home, this anthology means the world, and I hope you guys will run out and pick up a copy of it. But before I let you guys go today and end season 1 of the Weird Wide Web podcast, we have a little bit of bonus material. Yes, Kasey Hill, after we recorded this episode, left me a voice message, and I'd like to include it as a bit of bonus material to thank my listeners for sticking with us through every last minute of Weird Wide Web Podcast Season 1. Here you go, guys.
The bad part about JC's name is I actually know how it's supposed to be pronounced. But, I don't know why my brain operates the way that it does. It makes me get tongue-tied and makes me pronounce the way I've pronounced names in my head instead of out loud. So I sent JC a message and I'm like, I'm preemptively apologizing to you for butchering your name.